The twin moons of Varith hung over a broken world, casting silver light on the ruins of what was once the proud heart of the Vampire Empire. Inside the shattered palace, humans were rare, and even rarer were those who dared to speak without trembling. But Captain Ryland stood tall, his armor scratched, his eyes steady, his scars telling stories of 1,000 battles fought for coin and survival. He was a mercenary, nothing more, nothing less, a man who trusted his gun and not the promises of powerful beings. Yet today, he stood before a throne of obsidian crystal, and the woman sitting on it was no ordinary ruler. The Vampire Empress, Seraphine, sat like a goddess carved from night itself, her skin pale as starlight, her crimson eyes glowing with quiet hunger. She was both beautiful and terrifying, a creature of grace and cruelty. Her presence alone could silence an army. When she spoke, her voice flowed like velvet and venom mixed together. "Human," she said, "your kind has spilled my people's blood for centuries, yet here you stand in my court, offering your sword." Ryland bowed slightly, his tone calm. "Gold spends the same, whether earned from humans or monsters." A ripple of amusement crossed her lips, and for a brief second, the Empress almost looked human. She rose from her throne, her gown whispering like the wind through graves. "I do not need another killer," she said, walking closer until her shadow merged with his. "I need a protector, one who can stand by me even when the sun rises and the world turns to ash." Ryland didn't flinch, though her eyes seemed to pierce through his soul. "I'll guard you," he said simply, "but I won't worship you." That earned him a sharp smile, a dangerous one. "Good," she whispered. "I already have too many who do." The Empress turned and motioned for him to follow. They walked through long corridors lit by blue fire, their reflections stretching across mirrors older than any human city. Statues of forgotten kings watched them pass, their faces cracked and sorrowful. "You are brave, human," she said softly. "Or foolish, I can never tell the difference." Ryland's voice was dry, maybe both. Her laughter echoed like broken glass in the dark, beautiful yet unsettling. At the end of the hall stood a massive iron door carved with runes that pulsed faintly. Seraphine stopped before it, her expression unreadable. "This chamber will be your post," she said. "You will guard it until dawn, no matter what you hear, no matter what calls your name." Ryland nodded, though something in her tone made his stomach tighten. As she walked away, her cape brushed against him, leaving behind a scent of roses and blood. The door closed, sealing him inside with silence and shadows. Hours passed, and nothing moved. The palace felt alive, like it was breathing, whispering in a language he couldn't understand. He thought he saw shapes move in the mirrors, faint silhouettes watching him. He drew his pistol just once, but found nothing, only his reflection staring back. Then, somewhere beyond the walls, came a faint cry, soft and desperate. "Help me," the voice said, and it sounded almost human. He hesitated, remembering her warning. "Do not move, no matter what you hear." Sweat rolled down his temple as the voice grew louder. It was like someone was right beside him now, whispering into his ear. "Ryland, help me." He gritted his teeth and stared into the dark, refusing to move. And then, suddenly, the noise stopped, replaced by the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. The door creaked open, and in the pale light stood Seraphine, her eyes glowing faintly red. She looked at him as if measuring his soul. "You obeyed," she said softly. "Good." She walked past him and placed a hand on his chest, her fingers cold as death. "You may yet live to see the dawn," she whispered. Ryland didn't reply, but in that moment, he realized something. He wasn't guarding the Empress. He was trapped inside her game, and he had just taken the first step into a world where blood, loyalty, and desire meant the same thing. The palace of the Vampire Empress never truly slept. Even when the moons hid behind the storm clouds, strange lights moved through the corridors, and whispers slid along the walls like smoke. Captain Ryland stood at his post, armor cold against his skin, his eyes scanning the empty hall. He could feel it again, that uneasy heartbeat pulsing in the air, the same one that came from her mark burned into his chest. It was as if her soul watched him even when she was far away. Hours passed in silence, until the echo of something sharp broke the stillness. A flicker of motion at the end of the hallway caught his eye. Someone was moving, dressed in shadows, walking with the grace of a predator. Ryland stepped forward, his hand gripping the hilt of his blade. "Identify yourself," he said, his voice calm but firm. The figure didn't answer. It turned its head slightly, and he saw eyes like pits of black fire staring back at him. Before he could speak again, the intruder lunged. Steel clashed against steel, sparks scattering across the marble floor. The assassin moved fast, faster than any human could, a blur of dark robes and claws. Ryland blocked one strike, then another, the impact sending pain through his arm. He countered, cutting deep across the attacker's shoulder, dark blood splattering the walls. The figure hissed, revealing fangs. Another vampire, not one of her loyal guards, but something feral, corrupted. They fought in silence, each blow echoing through the ancient palace like thunder. Finally, Ryland caught the assassin off balance and slammed him against the pillar, his blade pressed to the creature's throat. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The vampire grinned, its teeth glinting. "You think she can be saved? Human, she is already dead." Before he could answer, the assassin's body burst into black mist, vanishing into the cold air, leaving only the stench of blood and ash. The hall went silent again, but Ryland knew he wasn't alone. From the shadows, she appeared, the Empress herself, her crimson eyes glowing like twin suns. She moved without sound, her long gown brushing against the floor like flowing water. Her gaze went from the bloodstain to him, then back again. "You fought well, human," she said, her tone unreadable. "Perhaps too well." Ryland bowed slightly. "Assassins don't ask for permission." A faint smile touched her lips. "And yet you survived one of my own." Ryland blinked. "One of yours?" She stepped closer, her face inches from his, the scent of roses and iron in the air. "Every night," she whispered, "I send a test. Those who guard me must prove they can stand against death, because death follows me everywhere." He stared at her, disbelief mixing with anger. "You risk your own life for a test?" Her smile widened, soft but dangerous. "My life has been at risk for centuries. Human, one more night means nothing." For a long moment, neither spoke, the hall bathed in faint blue light from the torches above. Then she reached out, brushing her fingers against the mark on his chest, and he felt his heart skip a beat. "The bond grows stronger," she murmured. "You felt me, didn't you, even before I came?" Ryland didn't answer, but she could see the truth in his eyes. "You may hate it now," she said quietly, "but in time, it will save you." She turned and walked away, her voice trailing behind like silk in the wind. "Rest now, Captain. Tomorrow, we leave the palace. The Blood Court demands my presence, and I will not go alone." When she vanished into the darkness, Ryland finally let out the breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looked down at his blade, still slick with dark blood. The palace whispered again, the same haunting hum rising through the walls. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled, and the scent of rain mixed with the metallic air. Ryland sheathed his weapon, his thoughts heavy. He had faced death, fought vampires, and stood before an empress who could crush worlds with a word. And yet, the thing that unsettled him most was not her power. It was the way she looked at him, as if she saw something even he didn't understand. The night felt colder, and the stars outside seemed dimmer. As he closed his eyes for a moment, the mark on his chest burned softly again, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but deep inside, he already knew this was no longer just a mission. It was the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. When dawn finally touched the sky above the crimson spires, the vampire palace came alive with quiet dread. Servants moved like shadows, guards whispered prayers they didn't believe in, and above them all, the Empress remained silent. Captain Ryland followed her through endless halls of black stone and red glass, his armor echoing softly against the ancient floors. The night before still burned in his mind, the fight, the mark, and her strange test that nearly cost him his life. Seraphine led him into a chamber filled with faint blue light. In the center stood a pool of silver water that shimmered like liquid moonlight. Symbols glowed on the floor, carved into the stone, humming with an old and dangerous magic. Ryland stopped at the edge, his hand resting on his weapon, unsure whether this was another trap. She turned to face him, her face unreadable, her crimson eyes softer now, almost human. "You fought well last night," she said quietly. "You've proven your worth. But I cannot let a human guard me without a bond," she continued, her voice calm. Ryland frowned. "A bond?" She nodded slowly. "A mark of obedience, a thread between our lives. It will keep you close. It will make you feel what I feel." Ryland hesitated, his soldier's instincts warning him. "Sounds like slavery." Her lips curved faintly. "Only if you think loyalty is a chain." She stepped into the silver pool, the water rippling around her. "Come forward, human," she said, her tone both a command and a promise. Ryland took a deep breath and waded in, the water cold as starlight. When he reached her, she raised a small dagger with a crimson gem in the hilt. "This blade was forged from my own blood," she whispered. "Its cut will bind us." She drew it across her palm. Crimson drops fell into the glowing water. Then she took his hand and pressed it against her wound, their blood mixing as the pool around them began to glow. Ryland felt a surge of heat rush through his body, pain and light colliding in his veins. The mark on his chest flared with fire, and he gasped, falling to one knee. Seraphine's hand touched his face, her expression strangely gentle. "Do not fight it," she murmured. "Breathe, let it find you." Visions flooded his mind, flashes of her memories, her wars, her loneliness, her centuries of watching everything she loved turn to dust. He saw her standing on battlefields of crimson mist, her wings dark as storms, her eyes filled with rage and sorrow. Then, for just a moment, he saw her as she once was, a woman laughing beneath a red moon, before the curse, before the throne. When he opened his eyes again, she was still holding him, and her eyes reflected his pain. "It's done," she said softly. "You are bound to me now." Ryland stepped back, his breathing heavy, his pulse strange and uneven. "What did you do to me?" he asked, his voice low. She turned away. "I gave you a part of my strength and took a part of your fear." He stared at her, unsure whether to feel grateful or violated. She looked over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "Do not hate me yet, Captain," she said. "You may find it useful before the next sunrise." The walls around them trembled slightly, as if reacting to her words. Somewhere far below, a deep rumble shook the palace, the sound of engines, or something worse. Ryland reached for his weapon. What was that? She closed her eyes. "The blood court stirs. They've grown restless since they learned I keep a human close." Her tone darkened. "They will not forgive me for this." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the slow rhythm of their breathing. Ryland met her gaze. "Then let them come." Seraphine's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You sound more like one of us than you think." The mark on his chest pulsed again, warm and alive, connecting him to her in ways he couldn't understand. He hated it, yet he couldn't deny that part of him already felt drawn toward her. A bond that was more than blood, more than magic, something older, something dangerous. As they left the chamber, the silver water behind them faded to black, the symbols vanishing one by one. The connection between them was sealed, unseen but powerful. And though Ryland told himself it was just a job, deep down, he knew he had already crossed the line. From mercenary to something far more cursed. From servant to someone the Vampire Empress could never let go. The night after the bond, Ryland could not rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the dark, her red eyes glowing softly, her voice whispering his name like an echo through the blood mark that linked their souls. He had been a soldier, a mercenary, a man who trusted no one. Yet this woman, this ancient empress, had already invaded his mind. He didn't understand it, but deep inside, he felt her pain every time his heart beat, like two souls struggling to share one rhythm. The palace was quiet, but it was not peaceful. The corridors hummed with strange energy, the torches flickering without wind, and the air itself felt heavy with secrets. When Ryland heard footsteps behind him, he didn't draw his weapon. He already knew who it was. Seraphine appeared from the darkness, wearing a long crimson robe that shimmered like living silk, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. "You haven't slept," she said softly, her tone more human than before. He turned to face her. "Neither have you." She smiled faintly. "Sleep is for those who dream of peace. I have long forgotten what that feels like. For a moment, the silence between them was gentle, almost warm, until he asked, "Tell me something. Why me? Why a human?" Her eyes flickered with emotion he couldn't name, because only humans still remember what loyalty means, she said. My own kind have forgotten. She moved to the window, where the twin moons painted her pale skin silver, and for the first time, Rylan saw the faint tremor in her hands. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She hesitated, then turned slightly. "No, not hurt, dying." The words hung in the air like frost. Rylan stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. "You can't be dying, you're immortal." She gave a soft, broken laugh. "Immortality is a curse with an expiration date. Human, I have lived too long, fed on too much sin. My blood grows weak, my power fades." Her voice trembled, something no one had ever seen from the Empress of the Crimson Dominion. "The curse that gives me strength is also devouring me from within," she whispered, "and the blood court waits for my end, ready to tear apart everything I built." Rylan took a step closer. There must be a way to stop it. Her eyes lifted to his, shimmering with faint tears that never fell. "There was once," she said, "before your kind came, before I became what I am." She looked away, her tone hollow. "A ritual, ancient, forbidden, one that requires something my kind no longer has. Warmth, the heartbeat of a mortal." Rylan frowned. "You mean mine?" Seraphine nodded. "Your bond already connects us. Through it, I can borrow your life, your strength, but only in moments of weakness." She paused, her lips trembling. "You will feel it too, when it happens." He stared at her, the realization sinking like cold iron. "So I'm not just your guard, I'm your lifeline." Her silence was the only answer he needed. But before he could speak again, she turned away. "I didn't choose this easily, Captain. Every day I ask myself if I made a mistake." Her voice broke softly. "But the galaxy doesn't forgive weakness, and I cannot die yet, not while my enemies wait beyond the stars." A heavy wind howled through the broken windows, scattering petals from the crimson gardens below. Rylan stepped beside her, his tone firm. "Then you'll live, I don't care what it costs." Seraphine looked at him, truly looked at him, as if searching his soul for truth. "You say that now," she whispered. "But when the time comes, you may hate me for what I'll take." He shook his head. "I've been dying my whole life for someone else's cause. This time, at least, it'll mean something." Her expression softened, and for the first time, she smiled, not as a queen, but as a woman who had forgotten how. The mark on his chest glowed faintly, and she raised her hand, touching it with her fingertips. The moment her skin met his, warmth spread through her veins, color returning to her cheeks, her heartbeat growing stronger. She gasped quietly, and he felt the same rush through his own body, like their souls were pulling each other back from the edge. When the light faded, she looked at him with quiet awe. "You shouldn't have done that. You'll feel the cost soon." He smirked. "Then I'll make sure it's worth it." The storm outside grew louder, thunder echoing across the skies of Vareth. Seraphine turned away, hiding the confusion in her eyes. "Rest while you can, human. Tomorrow the blood court gathers, and they will not welcome you." Rylan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her. As she disappeared down the corridor, he realized something had changed. The bond between them was no longer just magic. It was something alive, something dangerous. And somewhere deep inside, the human heart she borrowed had already started beating for her. The storm had not stopped since sunset. Thunder rolled across the crimson sky, and lightning carved silver veins over the towers of the vampire palace. Rylan stood outside the Empress's chamber, his armor damp with rain, his mind restless, the bond between them pulsing faintly under his skin. He could feel her again, somewhere beyond that door, her heartbeat slow, heavy, almost fragile. It was strange, he thought, how someone feared by galaxies could feel so human in the quiet. When the doors opened, a wave of warm air escaped, filled with the scent of roses and burning incense. Seraphine stood by the window, her long hair loose, her gown made of thin silk that shimmered like moonlight over water. She didn't turn when he entered, only said softly, "Do you ever wonder, human, why stars burn brighter before they die?" Rylan hesitated. "I've seen plenty of stars die, but never one that cared. Her lips curved slightly, a tired smile. Then you have now. She faced him, and he saw the weakness hiding beneath her calm, the color fading from her cheeks, the tremor in her hands. The blood court will arrive tomorrow, she whispered, and they will smell the human blood that runs through my halls. Let them come, he said. You're not alone anymore. Her gaze softened, then lowered. That may be the problem, Captain. For a moment, silence filled the chamber, broken only by the sound of rain against the glass. Then she walked toward him, slow, graceful, yet uncertain, as if every step cost her strength. When she reached him, she looked up, her voice barely a breath. Sleep beside me tonight. Rylan froze, unsure if he had heard right. Her eyes glowed faintly red, shimmering with something between command and longing. Not as my guard, she whispered, as warmth as life. He didn't move, torn between duty and desire, between the soldier he had been and the man he was becoming. Why me? He asked quietly. Why not one of your own kind? She stepped closer until her hand rested over his heart. Because they have no hearts that beat. The air around them grew still, time itself holding its breath. Rylan could feel her cold skin against his, the pulse of his blood echoing through her touch. He wanted to pull away, but something deeper, older, refused to let him. She led him to the grand bed draped in black silk, the curtains moving with the wind, the candles flickering softly. When she lay down, she looked small, fragile, more like a ghost than an empress. Rylan removed his armor, the clink of metal sounding too loud in the stillness. He lay beside her, unsure, tense, feeling the weight of every heartbeat that passed between them. Seraphine turned slightly, her hand tracing the edge of his jaw, her touch gentle, uncertain. You fear me, she said. I can feel it. I fear what you're doing to me, he whispered back. She smiled sadly. Then we fear the same thing. The bond flared suddenly, a rush of warmth spreading from his chest to hers. He felt her heartbeat sync with his, two rhythms becoming one. Her eyes widened, and she gasped quietly. It's working. Color returned to her skin, the tremble in her fingers fading, her lips parting in relief. But with every breath she took, he grew weaker, the energy draining from his veins like water from a wound. He didn't stop her, didn't speak, only watched her as she slowly came back to life. When the glow faded, she rested her head against his shoulder, whispering, You should have refused me. He gave a faint laugh, his voice low. You don't take no for an answer. The rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, the storm finally tired. For the first time since he met her, she looked peaceful, almost innocent. Do you know what's strange? She murmured, eyes half closed. For centuries I have been surrounded by beauty and power, and yet nothing felt alive until now. Rylan looked down at her, unsure what to say, his throat dry. You'll live, he said simply. She nodded slowly. For now, yes, because of you. Sleep came to them both, though neither truly rested. Through the bond, he dreamed her dreams, blood-red skies, endless battles, the loneliness of a throne made of bones. She dreamed his dusty battlefields, laughter long forgotten, a heart that never stopped fighting. And somewhere in the middle of those two worlds, they met, not as empress and soldier, but as two lost souls who had finally found each other in the dark. When morning arrived, the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The empress woke first, her eyes glowing softly as she looked at the man beside her. For a brief, fragile moment, she forgot the wars, the curse, and the crown. Then she whispered to the sleeping human, You shouldn't have come this far, Captain. But even as she said it, her hand lingered on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, a sound she knew she would never be able to live without again. When dawn rose over the crimson spires, the storm clouds had not cleared, they only waited, thick and heavy above the palace like the breath of something ancient. Rylan woke before the Empress, his body aching from the strange warmth they had shared, his blood still humming with her power. For a moment he simply watched her, the immortal ruler who now slept beside him like a mortal woman, her face calm, her silver hair tangled over his arm. He wanted to believe the quiet would last, but the mark on his chest pulsed again, warning him of what was coming. A deep rumble shook the ground, followed by the clang of gates below. He rose quickly, pulling on his armor, every movement silent and practiced. Seraphine opened her eyes, already sensing the danger. "They've come," she said softly, her tone like ice breaking under fire. "The blood court?" Rylan asked, though he already knew the answer. She nodded once, her crimson eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "They come to end what they call my shame." Outside, the palace erupted with noise, armored footsteps, growling beasts, the metallic scent of blood filling the air. Rylan helped her stand, though she waved off his hand with stubborn pride. "I don't need pity," she said, drawing a blade forged from dark crystal. "Only your loyalty." He nodded. "You have both." She gave a faint smile. "Then stand with me. Human, let the stars witness what a cursed queen and her mortal guard can do." They stepped into the grand hall, the ceiling cracked by thunder, red banners torn by the wind. Dozens of vampires waited, their armor gleaming, their fangs bared, eyes filled with hatred and hunger. At their head stood Lord Varick, the oldest of the blood court, his voice deep and cruel. "You've fallen, Seraphine. You've mixed your blood with filth, and now you'll die as one." Seraphine raised her sword, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You forget, old one. It was my blood that built your thrones." Then the battle began. The air filled with screams and steel. Rylan moved like a storm, his blade cutting through shadows, his gun spitting fire. Each time an enemy struck him, the bond flared, and Seraphine felt his pain like her own. In return, her strength flowed into him, cold and sharp as moonlight. Together they fought as one, human and immortal, bound by something neither could control. The hall became a blur of motion, blood on marble, fire on silk, lightning through stained glass. Varick leapt toward them, his claws glowing with black fire, his laughter echoing through the chaos. "You cannot win," he hissed. "You've weakened yourself with love." Seraphine met his attack with fury, their blades clashing in a burst of light that shattered the floor beneath them. Rylan joined her, striking at Varick's side, forcing him back step by step. But the old vampire was fast, too fast, his claws slicing across Rylan's chest, blood spilling down his armor. Seraphine screamed, the sound shaking the walls, her power exploding outward in waves of red energy. The blood court warriors stumbled, blinded, their flesh burning under her rage. She caught Rylan as he fell, her hands trembling, his blood staining her gown. "Don't you dare die on me, human," she whispered. "Not when I finally have something worth living for." He managed a faint smile. "Then keep fighting. I'll follow your lead." With a cry that echoed across the city, Seraphine rose, her wings of shadow spreading wide, her sword blazing like a crimson sun. She charged through the ranks, cutting down every traitor who dared raise a blade against her. When she reached Varick, she drove her weapon through his heart, her eyes burning brighter than the lightning outside. He fell without a sound, his ashes scattering across the marble floor. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of rain falling through the broken roof. The Empress dropped her sword and fell to her knees beside Rylan. The wound on his chest had stopped bleeding, the mark between them glowing faintly. Through the bond, she felt his heart struggling but still beating. She touched his face, her voice trembling. "You gave me your life again, foolish human." He breathed weakly. "Seems like a habit." For a long moment, they stayed there, surrounded by ruins and ghosts. The throne room of a fallen empire bathed in light and sorrow. When the surviving guards entered, they froze at the sight before them, an empress kneeling beside a mortal, holding him as though he were her world. Let them see, she thought. Let them understand what power truly means. Outside, the storm began to fade. The first rays of dawn touched the shattered palace walls. And for the first time in centuries, Seraphine felt warmth not from blood or magic, but from the fragile, stubborn heart of a human who refused to leave her side. The battle was over, the palace silent except for the whisper of rain falling through broken towers. Smoke curled around shattered pillars, the crimson banners hung torn and blackened, and the great throne of obsidian lay cracked down the middle. In the center of it all, the Vampire Empress knelt beside a dying human, her gown soaked with his blood, her hands trembling against his chest. "Rylan," she whispered, "you must stay awake." His breath came slow, shallow, but his eyes still found hers, filled with warmth that even death couldn't dim. "You won," he murmured. "That's what matters." Her head shook, silver hair falling across her face. "Not without you." The bond between them flickered like fading light, the mark on his chest dimming with every heartbeat. Seraphine closed her eyes and reached deep within the connection, feeling his soul slipping away. She had lived 1,000 years, ruled countless worlds, and yet she had never feared anything until now. Her voice broke as she said, "You gave me life again, human, but I cannot give it back." Rylan smiled faintly. "You already did." Outside, the horizon began to glow, thin streaks of gold cutting through the clouds. Dawn was coming, the one thing no vampire could face, the light that burned everything she was. The surviving guards fell to their knees, begging her to flee to the crypts below. But Seraphine ignored them, her gaze fixed only on the human lying in her arms. "You will die if you stay," he whispered weakly. She looked toward the sunlight creeping across the marble, then back to him. "Then I'll die beside you." The warmth of the first light touched her hand, smoke rising where skin met sun. Still she did not move, her power flaring like fire in defiance. "I was born in darkness," she said softly, "but you taught me what it means to see the light." Rylan's hand lifted weakly to her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Then live, Seraphine," he whispered, "because if the galaxy loses you, it loses something worth saving." Her heart broke, a soundless pain that echoed through the bond. The mark on his chest glowed again, brighter this time, pulsing with strange light. Rylan gasped as his body began to fade, not into death, but into energy, into her. The bond reversed, pouring his remaining life into her veins. She tried to pull away, screaming his name, but it was too late. The human who had guarded her had become her heartbeat, her breath, her very soul. When the light faded, she stood alone in the center of the ruined throne room, her wounds healed, her eyes glowing like dawn itself. The sunlight no longer burned her skin, it caressed it, warm and alive. Her people watched in awe as their empress walked through the morning light for the first time in history. Half human, half vampire, reborn through sacrifice. In her heart, Rylan's voice whispered softly, "You're not alone anymore." Years passed, and the story became legend. They said the empress rebuilt her empire not with fear, but with hope, that she forbade the hunting of humans, and for the first time, peace grew between blood and flesh. Every night, she stood at the balcony of her new palace, looking at the stars. Sometimes, she swore she could still feel his hand over hers, steady, protective, eternal. The soldiers called her the Dawn Queen, the ruler who walked in sunlight and shadow both. But she called herself by another name, the name only one human had ever spoken to her with love. Seraphine, the one who learned how to live. And somewhere, among the stars that glimmered over the world they had saved, two lights burned side by side. One red as blood, one gold as the morning sun, never fading, never apart. The galaxy remembered them not as ruler and guard, not as vampire and man, but as two souls who defied death, darkness, and destiny, bound forever by a promise whispered in the dark. "Sleep beside me, human," she had said. And even after eternity, he never left her side.